Hello, everyone. Professor DeSimone here. Welcome to Psych 10130's teaching assignment. Today, we're going to be covering negative reinforcement versus negative punishment. So, as part of this teaching assignment, we're going to primarily be focusing on the world of operant conditioning. We're going to be taking a closer look at a few of the finer details that enshroud our topic, such as how operant conditioning is different from other practices that influenced its creation, or different from practices that were even created around the same time. And the main point of our lesson is going to be what negative punishment and reinforcement is, examples, and a brief comparison of the two, and lastly, an explanation of why this is relative and important in both the everyday world and in the field of psychology. So let's get right into it. Edward Thorndike primarily focused his research on animals and their voluntary behaviors and their congruent consequences. So his findings, the law of effect, could be argued to be one of the earlier versions of operant conditioning. However, with no development into formal modeling or systems, Thorndike's ideas actually stayed as they were ideas. But B.F. Skinner, who was born nearly 30 years after Thorndike, would unknowingly become an infamous name within the field of psychology for his studies. And while Skinner acknowledged all of the work and findings composed of Thorndike and of Pavlov, he didn't find it appropriate as a behaviorist to study phenomena that weren't able to be objectively measured and verified through observable behavior and environmental events like reinforcement and punishment. Though the name might imply a tone of negativity, the idea of negative reinforcement actually does quite the opposite. So people often utilize reinforcements much more frequently in everyday life than they might realize, such as a safety warning signal, turning off after buckling a seatbelt in a car, snoozing or shutting off an annoying alarm clock in the morning to wake yourself up, or even taking medicine to remove the pain of a headache. All of these actions ultimately lead to the replication of a behavior because it removes an aversive stimulus. So you can see I got a little slide to the side that just, gives you an example or a visual example of how one might forget to wear sunscreen and, oh, look at that, you get sunburn. But you could remove the sunburn by introducing sunscreen. So it's going to want to make you repeat that behavior of applying sunscreen because you want to remove that unpleasant stimulus. So now we're going to get into negative punishment. And these two concepts are often confused, and understandably so. Different from negative reinforcement, though, comes punishment. And punishment, as the name implies, is much more focused on decreasing behaviors as opposed to increasing them. And negative punishment is defined in the book as follows: the presentation of a stimulus or event following a behavior that acts to decrease the likelihood of the behavior being repeated. So just as we had kind of recapped a second ago. And a simplified example of this concept would be if a child physically struck their sibling and got their favorite toys taken away. So by removing that pleasant stimulus for them, that would be their toys, as opposed to a negative stimulus, the goal ultimately aims to decrease the overall frequency of them hitting their sibling in the future because, they just learned that their positive stimulus is now at risk. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want my favorite toys taken away, so I probably wouldn't risk that. Let's get into the next one. So while Skinner ended up identifying a total of 4 types of events between punishment and reinforcement, both positive and negative, today we're really only talking about the negative ones. So it should be heavily acknowledged that while these two processes share the word negative, they produce vastly different results in regards to their effects on a subject's behavior. And the main difference can boil down to the addition or subtraction of an operant and the increase or decrease of the likelihood of a behavior. And that's from lesson 5. And as a result, these practices actually produce opposite results of one another. And in our textbook by Nolan and Hockenberry, it reads that punishment decreases the future performance of the behavior, while negative reinforcement increases it. So while it's really easy to get the two of them confused, what you'll want to focus on is whether presenting or removing an operant reinforces or repels that stimulus. So why is this important? Why should we care? What does it matter to us? So operant conditioning has allowed the field of psychology to grow exponentially. Skinner's research on these fundamental ideas has likely helped many. I mean, I can't put a physical number to that, but who knows? It could be thousands, it could be millions. And he's likely helping psychologists or practitioners understand mental health conditions, build foundations for training and education, and obviously modify behaviors because that's what the point of this is. So the process of these concepts have gone as far as changing the world because now anyone from parents, coaches, therapists, and teachers can now help modify those behaviors of those who are in need. And that could range from anything. That could be from teenage kids smoking rates to the improvement of our social skills or even reducing self-destructive behaviors. And by continuing to study these concepts, we gain to understand human behavior as a whole. And, one can't assume that introducing or removing a particular stimulus works for everyone. Everybody's different. But the beauty is that with this practice, we can ultimately utilize it and learn to adapt. So, thank you, everyone, for joining us on this emotional journey through negative reinforcement versus negative punishment. Haha, I know you like that one. This is Professor DeSimone for Psych 10130, and I hope you enjoyed.